Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, and welcome to Warui Deshou's Stream of Thought with a slightly different layout. -1, unfortunately, because Doc is away on holiday. I did not approve this, our HR did not approve of this, but somehow he still slinks off like the snake he is. I will get him for this. This will not stand. Swear. Coming for you, Doc. He's going fishing, apparently. How dare he? How dare he, I say. But the show must go on, as they say, in all seriousness, man's allowed to have a holiday. But joining me, of course, to help me discuss the next, bunch of episodes for Dynazenon is returning guest and presenter of Oh No Anime is Marc, the millionaire. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much again for having me back on. It's been a blast doing this whole show with y'all, and I'm happy to both fill in and be the guest this week. So I'm filling in dual roles.
No, it's always good to have you here, Marc. Your insights are always welcome, as is your humour and your banter. So then, yes, with Doc absent, this will probably be a little bit of a shorter podcast as a result. We're going to omit some small sections here and there, but Patreon questions will still be covered. Do not fret. We've also got talking points to go through as well. We've got plenty to talk about in this particular batch of 3 episodes because, they took the dial and turned up to 11 pretty hard as of episode 7 and decided, no, we didn't turn it hard enough. We're going to turn up even more in episode 9, where, if ever I saw an anime show pop off before, I think this might very well be the first time. So we're going to be going through a fair bit of stuff today as we cover episodes 7 through 9 of SSSS.Dynazenon, finally cashing in on the Gridman universe element of it, of the title, and doing pretty well with it all told, I would say. Not flawlessly, though. There are a couple of quibbles I have here and there that will probably mean people will start putting bricks through my window, because we'll get to it. There's going to be a lot to discuss, So, this being our Stream of Thought podcast, of course, we normally give a 2-minute summation of the episodes. We're going to go through that in a little while. We'll then do Patreon questions, and then we'll do talking points. We're going to omit creatives this time around, because that has never been my forte, and I wouldn't even know where to look. If I end up going on Wikipedia, I'll probably start crediting, Dynazenon to, someone, I don't know, I just probably start saying names of people I know, this bit was done by Jenna Abachi, and this was done by, Hideki Kamiya. He's not actually an anime guy, but I'm just mentioning him anyway because it's just names I know. I'm just filling them in. But anyway, so Marc, I don't want to spring this onto you, but would you be willing to have a try at summarising the plot of these 3 episodes in 2 minutes or less? How do you feel about this challenge, my friend?
Oh my God! All right, well, I can try. I have not prepared for this, but I can try for it.
It's all in good fun, my friend. There's no, I don't have an ejector button attached to my controls for this stream to send you away if you get it wrong or omit anything. But it can just be a good laugh. So with that in mind, then your 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to get ready.
Okay.
All right. Your 2 minutes to summarise the episodes of Dynazenon. We're covering 7 through 9. They begin now!
Alright, episode 7, Auntie and the Kaiju Frog Girl, both from the original Gridman, show up. Auntie is confirmed to be indeed Grid Knight. They show up and he transforms and battle the Kaiju, and while Dynazenon is getting absolutely trounced. Then they go to the Tokyo Bay Aqua Line, a very popular location in Gainax stuff. And then they do the Gunbuster pose. They have a Predator 2 moment, and then they throw each other at the monster and kill it. And Kaiju Frog Girl twirls a baton. Episode 8, the failed Kaiju humanization arc. They run across a small Kaiju that can turn stuff different colors. The Kaiju kids go to the Family Fun Center. That Kaiju that they found turns out to be not good, but also maybe good. I don't know. Auntie and Yomogi have an Evangelion moment searching for the mini Kaiju. The mini Kaiju turns big, and then Yomogi blows it up with his big dragon bazooka. And also maybe does an instance domination. Episode 9 is a look inside Chisei's life. Goldburn shows up, and then maybe the greatest henshin sequence in all of Trigger anime happens. Kaiser Grid Knight is summoned. Another kaiju is beaten. The power of friendship is wonderful, and then they all go to the summer Matsuri and launch fireworks. The end.
You did that with about 25 seconds left to spare. You did very well, my friend. Well
I knew
done.
I wasn't gonna. I missed a lot of stuff, a lot of minor stuff, but that's the gist.
You got the broad crux of it, and let's be honest. We will have plenty of the more emotionally resonant stuff to talk about as we go through our talking points, but the big moment, the big kid moment, the chef's kiss moment is Super Dragon Kaiser Grid Night, or whatever it's called, which, I mean, yes. It's the only thing that was missing from the end of it was just the word motherfuckers.
Yeah, a moment for the history books, indeed. For mecha anime, for tokusatsu, also for Gundam. I'm just going to throw that out there because it does have a cape, which I think Gundam has a exclusive license on for robots. So, yeah, we'll get to it because I have a lot of all caps notes that I made earlier while we were watching.
Are they in Impact's font as well, just to double up the impact of it? Because I feel you're 100% right on that.
Yeah,
this
it's in Joker Man.
Oh, nice! That's a quality font choice there. But yes, this is indeed for those of you who've not seen the episodes. In which case, why you listen to this podcast, you've already had 2 great moments spoiled for you. I'm so sorry. Although that being said, describing them doesn't really have the same effects, or as watching them. So you probably still can get away with it. But yeah,
poorly describing them, I might add.
Nah, you said the Predator moment, and that's why this is part of the stream layout state, and also will be the thumbnail for every version of this episode we put out on the podcast ever. Because Dynazenon, you son of a bitch, it's great.
Yeah,
it's amazing. But
you glorious motherfucker, you did it.
You did it. So yeah, we're going to be talking about all of this in due course and going for our Patreon questions as well. But I just want to quickly also mention, for those of you who are joining us for the first time and might not know who Marc is, Marc, would you very quickly just want to tell the people in the audience, whether they're listening live or later, who you are and what you do and what your interest in Gridman Dynazenon is?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Marc Schultz. I run a sort of anime multimedia collective called Ono Anime. Been active in the space for, probably maybe 5 years now, almost 6 at this point. I've experienced making YouTube videos and podcasts. I've pretty much anything that people talk about anime online, medium-wise, I've done it at some point. But I've always been a pretty, I grew up as a pretty big Gainax fan, and that has transformed me into the big Trigger fan. I've seen every single one of their works and like more than most, good or bad. So I have, I really enjoyed Gridman. I've also seen the original Gridman series and have been a fan of that for a bit. I somehow managed to see Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad when I was a kid.
Nice.
In the Spider-Man cartoon and X-Men cartoon and Big Bad Beetleborgs block on TV. So I'm pretty damn well invested in this very weird intersection of Japanese media properties. But I do think that Gridman and Dynazenon are probably 2 of the best things that Trigger has done so far, at least in the TV anime space. I mean, they're something special, and never has that been more solidified than after these last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't want to necessarily tie the idea of a universe as a meta franchise concept to strictly what happened in the West with the Marvel films particularly, and then of course the lesser I was going to say lesser, but actually probably is giving it too much credit, the lesser attempts, for example the Dark Universe, if everyone remembers that. In
the DC universe,
which yes,
arguably should have been successful, but I'm actually kind of glad at this point that it wasn't successful for different reasons. But yeah, I think everybody kind of goes to the Marvel universe because it is by far and away the most successful shared universe visual media franchise ever.
Yeah.
It's just an absolute powerhouse for good and bad, obviously. But
it's printed a lot of money in that time.
Yeah, like it or leave it. A lot of people like it, and a lot of people spend a lot of money on it.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, it's funny though. Like I was just mentioning the Dark Universe before, which opened with the Mummy film, and yet somehow
and also closed with the Mummy film.
Yep. Put that one back in the coffin. It came back out of.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
it's like that One Piece gif of the zombie coming out of the ground, and Luffy just goes and just gently pushes it back down.
Back in your
goodbye, Dark Universe.
Back in your box. But I just
don't need you.
I just laugh because Dynazenon is a better Dark Universe than the actual Dark Universe, given that Galma and his colleagues are mummies.
Yeah. Come
at me if I'm wrong, if you feel so, but good luck with that one, because you know I'm right.
Eat shit, Tom Cruise.
Hey, look,
Trigger did it better than you.
Yep.
On a fraction of the budget, and with no big name actors.
Yep. I mean, that's it. That's my big hot take for this particular podcast today. But anyway,
steaming hot.
Anyway, thank you very much for introducing yourself, Marc. We'll come back to you talking about where you can be found Lacey, of course, because Marc does a lot of great stuff, particularly in relation to music anime. I believe you do DJ sets as well on occasion, if I recall.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes. a lot of stuff definitely worth checking out, but we'll, of course, get back to promotions on that later. But to spin it tangentially to other kinds of promotions, it's time for a bit of shameless self-pluggery. It's the thing that I like to do the most on this podcast, which is, you might think to yourself, hey, these handsome chaps, may want to, put some money in their coffers so that way I can buy more delicious Copperberg gin and lemonade mixed fruit. This ended up in my fridge over the weekend. How did it get in my fridge over the weekend? Beats me, but it's cold and it tastes like, alcoholic blackcurrant. That'll do.
And more importantly, you need more money to get more of it.
Yes, exactly. This shit doesn't currently pay for itself, but in theory it could. And you can help me with that, listeners at home, by going over to patreon.com/Warui Deshou and getting signed up to our $2, $3, or $5 tiers. The $2 tier is the one that gets you access to our Discord. So we host things like, group watches, game nights, movie watches, and just generally good discussion and good banter in there. A lot of really nice people in there. It's quite a good little community. But on top of that, get yourself on Stack gets you the privilege to ask questions of the stream of thought. So if you want to ask questions about Dynazenon of myself or Doc, if he were here and not sunning himself somewhere, the bastard, or even Marc for that matter, you can do so by getting on that and getting on our Discord. $3 tier gets you access to our second stream podcast, which we're currently using to cover Vivi, Flora Eye's song, how do I put this, a time-traveling buddy cop temporal fuckery android show with music, and it's actually really good, so definitely check that out. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can give us $5 a month to get access to all of those benefits, plus our final podcast line, which is Deshou the Third. This is one that we use to cover stuff requested by the patrons, along with Second Stream for that matter. We're currently covering Bottom Tier Tomazaki, a show that has somehow miraculously just averted its own mediocrity and become something pretty damn decent. And if you want to find out how I reacted to that, get on over there, have a look. So anyway, yes, that's our Patreon. Do check that out. If you're already listening, of course, on, say, SoundCloud. Oh, sorry, not SoundCloud. We don't put SoundCloud. Spotify, Apple Music, whatever podcast search you're on. Just drop us a like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds.
If you're somehow listening on SoundCloud, do that too.
Why not?
Why not? Listening to a weird bootleg re-upload from 5 years from now that you've stumbled across because of the algorithm, then go support.
I would be okay with a bootleg re-upload of these episodes being made, so it sounds like a really bad VHS. There's tracking noises in it somehow, even though it's not a video or a VHS tape.
Honestly, that's how you know you've made it. Mm-hmm. Is if you're getting re-uploaded on SoundCloud, you're there.
So yeah, make that happen too, would-be listener. Okay, so speaking of our Patreon questions, of course, we should probably get straight onto them. We have a couple here, one batch of which comes from Rackham, Bottom Tier Pirate Rackham, as a matter of fact. We have 2 of them. The first of which is, in episode 8, Team Dynazenon find the small kaiju, and Night tells them that they are born from human emotions, following up that statement by telling them to kill it before it becomes a threat. But when Chisei befriends the kaiju she finds in episode 9, that being Goldburn, it helps her. Do you think these instances are the show itself trying to send a message about emotions, or is Knight simply giving good advice and Chisei got lucky? So, Marc, what are your thoughts on Rackham's question there about Grid Knight's advice?
I am inclined to believe that there is no such thing as luck in this universe when they name something as specifically as that. I just think that so I was gonna talk about this at some point, so it's good that we brought this up. But in episode 8, when Yomogi does a bit of instance domination, at least that's what we're led to believe is happening. There's a really quick flash of what appears to be the same sort of weird seed thing that Chisei's been carrying around. And Goldburn's appearance in episode 9 seems to point to the fact that that seed was, in fact, Goldburn, like, manifesting through her emotions, I guess, which is why he responds to her. So I don't know if it's just that, like, the episode 8 kaiju is a really weird case because it's like this weird sort of like malformed kaiju, and they don't really go out of their way to tie it to any like one existing character in that episode from what I remember. So I don't know if it's just that, you know, because Chisei was carrying this like egg or seed around with her, that when Goldburn showed up, he responded to her and was like loyal to her and like a quote unquote good kaiju, you know, because she had been with him and like had a connection. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it's luck. I do think it's purposeful. I don't necessarily think that this whole concept of like emotions birthing kaiju and like the whole actual like mechanics of this type of thing have been fully fleshed out yet. So I think it may be still a little bit too early on, because I feel like they're skirting something big, because now that we know that Yomogi is capable of some sort of at least like proto instance domination, where he is able to like at least kind of like share a mutual connection with a kaiju or something like that. I don't know if it was just that particular kaiju or if it was any of them and he has this ability. I don't know. Like I said, there's still a lot of stuff there that hasn't been fleshed out, but I don't think it's luck. It's like everything in this that they like show on screen is servicing something. So I don't think it's luck. I just think that, you know, what exactly is going on, we don't know the full extent of yet. Yeah, basically.
I think to answer Rackham's question here, there's some interesting observations we can make from Anti's opinion on killing the kaiju, because you have to bear in mind that I mean, we've mentioned, for example, that it is indeed Grid Knight, but it's not Grid Knight necessarily as we knew him at the end of Grid Man. Like, the big giant guy, same person. But Grid Knight, Anti, has had quite the glow up since then. He no longer is a trash diving raccoon, and instead he looks like Samurai Caliber, if Samurai Caliber stood up straight and also had like the most like stereotypical white anime haircut ever, where it crosses one of his eyes. Looks like Ragnar the Blood Edge from Blaze Blue. But
he's an adult.
He's an adult, which is also the case for his companion, who was also in Gridman, that being Anocylus, the tiny like kaiju girl who also gets really huge at one point.
She introduces herself as the second.
Yes.
In Dynazenon, so that's kind of what I've been referring to her as.
Okay, so yeah, she's there as well. But the thing is, we have to remember that, of course, Ansi is operating with all the experience that he had in Gridman, all the lessons he learned. One of which, this is something I predicted, and I'm very glad it took the time to show this. The eugenicists, when Grid Knight show up, like, okay, we're going to try. We'll give it a go. And they can't. They can't control Grid Knight. And I'm like, that's neat. Because it really confirms like Anti's like evolution as a character. Like we saw, of course, how he changed over the course of Gridman and eventually became an ally. But this feels like the full stop on the end of the sense that, because he was a kaiju in the past and now he very much isn't. And they literally, and that's proved like mechanically for the fact they can't do the live long and prosper to take control of him. But the thing to note as well is that by his logic, in saying that, hey, they should kill this little malformed kaiju now, that, if it was applied to him in the history of the universe, in the Gridman, would mean he would never come to be who he is now. So he is providing a lesson in the show's mechanics that actively argues against his own existence, because he was allowed the opportunity to grow as a person, to, change for the better, to become human. He's no longer a kaiju. And now he's saying, this one here, this one that looks like it's straight out of Made in Abyss at the very end, kill it! Give it the old Yeller treatment! Bang, 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 behind the shed. Do it. Can't be too cautious. And so I find that really fascinating, that he's offering advice that is contradictory to his own history, but it also goes to show that even though he is actually right with this particular kaiju, but it's kind of a bit more complicated than that, he's still, he comes into the show, Dynazenon that is, and while he's a badass and all that, he's not immediately necessarily right. And that plays a big part in how I think this, for the most part, this show handles bringing him over from Gridman without devaluing Dynazenon, the robot, or the characters who pilot it, because that's a big part of doing team-ups when you have these shared universes. So I think that the answers to this is Anti, I meant to say, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. He's arguing against, the very thing that led him to become who he is, and he's therefore wrong. I think that Chisei's actions prove that, hey, and also in tandem with episode 8, the kaiju are not the simplistic creatures we believe them to be. I mean, you'd know that if you'd watched Gridman, of course, but this is a different system, and it still adds in those layers of complexity that make it more interesting as a result. So yeah, I think it's ultimately a case of he's wrong, and he's wrong in a way that I find really interesting about what he reveals about his character, that he just seems blind to his own development.
Yeah. Well, he was, I think the implication of his growing up as a character is that he is no longer a child. He's no longer as impulsive or outwardly, bratty and all the negative aspects of his original character. But also part of a big part of growing up is kind of forgetting a lot of your childhood.
Yeah, true.
So that could be part of it. But yeah, like I said, there's still so much going on there that even with as much as they have implied and implicitly shown, there's still I think one big central this is the big reveal that they still have not gotten to, as to the origin of kaiju and how they relate to people and how they relate to specific people. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of stuff that we still haven't gotten to. But,
We'll see what comes next, but I'm certainly intrigued. The next question from Rackham goes like this. Have you ever helped someone you were either jealous of, or someone who you might benefit from not helping, like Kiyomi did with saving Inamoto's husband, Mr. Tony Stark, due to it being the right thing to do? This is one of those things I'm going to have to dredge my memory. I feel like the answer to that is I probably have done. But, gosh.
I don't know if I've ever done it because at the time I thought it was the right thing to do. I think it was more just out of a sense of obligation.
Yeah.
Or a sense of duty. I know that when I was in marching band in high school, my later years in marching band, I was in a leadership position my last 2 years. And there was a lot of people in band that I did not like, that I ended up helping either for the good of the whole or, just out of a sense of duty to my position. But yeah, I don't know. Sense of jealousy is one thing. I don't know if I've ever been put in a situation quite as dire as the one that Kiyomi faces in the show.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would like to think that I would not have a second thought of saving somebody's life. If I was jealous of them or didn't like them, if they were a hate-filled lunatic, then I probably would think twice about it. But someone who's the husband of a crush who I just don't like because I think he's annoying, I don't think I would have any second thoughts about saving that.
It's a difficult question to answer because, as you rightly point out, it's rare that Will have been put in such a situation where, for one, we'll even have to be involved in helping someone in danger. I'm first aid trained, for example, and do you know how many times in public I've actually had the opportunity to even use that, never mind if I knew that person or not firsthand? The answer to that is 0.
Yeah.
Big fat 0. I have used it at work admittedly, but that's beside the point because it's just more of a randomized environment. But I think that by that token, though, as well, like, the more grave the situation, the more inclined I would like to believe people would be, to help them, even if they did have history or backstory. What I will comment on, though, is I actually think, again, this is something that we discussed in our last podcast, and you actually mentioned this in our private chat about how some of the things that we discussed in the previous podcasts, like, were immediately addressed by episode 7 in a way that almost felt kind of eerie. So one of my complaints from last time was that, what are the stakes here? Like, what happens if the eugenicists just trash the city? Are people actually dying or not? Because in Gridman, again, people are erased from existence, which is quite horrifying. And then we get this, where we only really see, Inamoto's husband grievously wounded. But that's still enough, in my opinion, because we don't want it to get too... we have to remember the tone of the show as well. Like, people aren't really all... there's no blood, for example, generally speaking. It'd be very weird, I suppose, having fought on it if, the show suddenly diverged into war in the Pocket territory, where there are people, with, arms missing in the street, people bleeding out and all that. There is a set tone for this show, and I think it's in its best interest not to be too graphic with its violence towards regular, tiny little people. But with Emoto's husband, the thing I love about this scene with Kaomi is, you were talking, of course, about, maybe we'd hope we wouldn't hesitate. But what I really think fleshes him out as a character but still proves he's a good person is the fact that he does hesitate. Now, am I saying that's the right for him to hesitate, for him to think about it? No. In an ideal world, we would, of course, immediately jump in and try and help if at all possible. That's what we'd like to believe we would do. But not everyone's like that, and Kaomi is a flawed character. And this shows that he hesitates. He does change his mind. He does go and help. And, of course, he gets the most amazing, side conversation from Emoto later when she says, oh, it just made us realise how we should be even closer now. And he's like, Meh. But... yeah. But what are you going to do? I appreciate for the humanity it gives him as a character, that shows that it's... Because I think that, in fiction, you can run into a problem where characters are written to be, so... virtuous, or where they don't ever feel tempted to do all things, because human nature, in my opinion, is based on the temptation to do terrible things. I'm not saying, of course, you start killing people in the street, but rather I mean to say, we think about doing the wrong thing because it's the easier way out, but then we check ourselves, we stop ourselves, and we turn around and do what's right. And he did do that in the end, to his credit, which I think is a much more believable and interesting behaviour from him. And it shows that he does have, a moral character in a way that would be more interesting than just him simply diving in and helping. So, I was legitimately impressed by that scene, because it gave me what I wanted in showing actual consequences. But then it actually built on that to show that, hey, our character, our hero, or one of them, he's not perfect by a long shot. But he still does the right thing in the end. Good on him for doing that.
Yeah, he's trying. And that's all that you can really ask of anybody.
Yeah.
He's just to try.
Yeah, and I think there's also an interesting parallel then if you think how this show contextualizes the idea of fighting in a giant robot as being the easy thing for him to do, but actually helping a regular human being is more difficult. Which is quite powerful when you think about it. He's driving this fucking robot around, which he could in theory be killed in, and shooting things with its giant hands. But I think that the fact that he finds helping Inamo's husband more has more hesitancy about that is really telling and quite powerful. It's a good little scene, excellent little moment.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, next and final Patreon question comes from Grizzly, and it goes something like this. Yume's investigation has hit several roadblocks, few real answers, and a lot of emotional turmoil. If you were in your Moggy's shoes, what would your advice be to Yume, if any, after the events of episode 9? So just to confirm where episode 9 ends off, it ends with the group succeeding again against the eugenicists. This is when Goldburn comes about, but it's also in which Yume is again hit a complete brick wall. She speaks to Futaba Senpai, the guy who was dating his sister, and apparently he was just a complete cunt. So he was a complete dick, basically.
Yeah, he's an asshole.
He's an asshole. But that's it. The trail goes cold. We're still trying to piece together from history and from secondhand accounts what happens to her. And I think that if I were in Yomogi's shoes, the best thing I can suggest, and this is in context of them also seemingly becoming more and more enamored of each other, like even to a romantic way. Like there's so many little framing cues, ways that they are portrayed together. The ending of episode 9, which I want to talk about separately, is just such a beautiful moment. I think it's really powerful. But I think that given that they seem pretty much like on course to becoming a couple at this point, I think what he needs to do is actually do what a couple would do in this place. Say, I'll support you whatever you choose to do. Now, I'm not saying that needs to be unconditional and unceasing, even if, like, you know, heaven forbid, Minami, like, you know, never ever stopped thinking it just destroyed her life. There is a line that should be crossed. But we're not there yet. And what we do see in these episodes is that even though Minami is, like, you know, struggling with you know, finding out the history of her sister and, like, you know, running into these brick walls, there are still moments in which they actually have, like, genuine joy. Like, there's little moments like the fireworks party, for example, where it's not all miserable and bleak all the time, you know. Those moments are still worth enjoying and still worth living. So, yeah, my advice to him would be just be there for her, but be ready to step in if you need to say, hey, have you considered maybe enough's enough? Because ultimately, unless the show decides that it can bring her back, which I don't think it will, her sister is gone. That sounds cold of me to say, but I'm not stating it as, like, you know, forget about her entirely, but she's still there. Her life is still worthwhile and still deserves, you know, meaning and still deserves joy in it. And that, you know, that should be allowed to happen. It shouldn't be the case where she just completely and utterly sublimates all of that in favor of, you know, constantly trying to dig up the history of her sister to no avail.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just, honestly, if I were him, the only thing I would probably say more than any of that is just that she needs to maybe prepare herself for the possibility that, like, nothing is going to come from this. And that also sounds kind of harsh, but I feel like, especially with how realistic a lot of that sort of investigation has seen, I mean, like, none of these people seem to be particularly, like, good people. Like, even the quote-unquote good ones of the group are still clearly hiding stuff from them. And they have every incentive to obscure and deflect the, you know, blame that they all clearly share for Minami's sister's death. So, yeah, I would probably just, as gently as possible, prepare her for the very real possibility of just having to reach a point where you're getting stonewalled so much that it's just not worth it for your own safety and mental health to continue, you know, continue this sort of investigation.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
As shitty as that sounds, like, it's just like it pays to be an outside voice looking in, trying to be as realistic as possible with, you know, these very clearly not very admirable human beings that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. I don't really have much else to add to that. I just, I think that if you've seen our discussions on Wonder Egg Priority, this is again very adjacent to that. And I think that much like Wonder Egg, it feels pretty authentic to how people would act in these situations. I mean, obviously giant robots or psychic overworlds notwithstanding. But nonetheless, it feels true, like that if you were in the situation where someone you cared about deeply but didn't really know all that well are gone, you would want to dig and find out what had happened to them, like try and understand better, come to some sort of like realization for your own conscience. But there's only so much one can do with unearthing like history. You can't possibly have been at every single second, every single day of someone's life. you'll never have the complete picture just by virtue of the way, like, the world works, by the way that your own perception works. I'm physically in the same space all the time. You can't know exactly what's in their head. You've got to eventually come to a point, I think, where you accept the explanation you've come up with using the evidence you have at hand, and it'll always be a partial explanation, but will it be a satisfactory one for you is the main question.
Yeah.
And the show, by the way, just to mention, does continue with the idea that, again, Minami's still playing with the links, the things that chain her in. And there's, of course, many continued images, not just of her, but also of Kaomi as well, in particular in episode 7, of them being, like, encircled with fences in front of them, behind them, guardrails, barriers, etc. The atmosphere sometimes feels very crushing in this show. Like, they literally feel like they're in prison. And funny enough, I wonder if that might actually turn out to be true in a sense by the end of these episodes. After all, Grid Knight and the second do mention that there was, like, they managed to break in some way to this world. So, who knows?
I do wonder how. Yeah, it's like one of our biggest questions that we've always had from the beginning is how much are they going to break open this clearly like computer-based world that they're living in, or whatever the hell's going on. How much are they going to show the inner workings of it?
Only when the world's eggshell has been broken can the chick truly be born. It's the Utena stuff all over again. There you go. I got my mandatory once per podcast Utena reference in. I can put that on my tax wrap. Whew! Yes. Anyway, that actually brings us to the end of our Patreon questions this time around, and I just wanted to thank both Rackham and Grizzly for getting those in there. Certainly a lot more to discuss in a little while as well. If you again think to yourself, hey, I'd like to be able to ask questions of these guys as they go through these episodes, patreon.com/Warui Deshou, pop your details in, job done. It'll take you 30 seconds.
There you go.
I'll even time you. So, with that in mind, we're now going to move on to talking points. Mark, I'm going to let you get started very quickly while I briefly take a 15-second jaunt over to my fridge and back again, because unfortunately, my mixed fruit alcoholic blackberry juice, or blackcurrant juice, is empty, like my heart. So I'm going to go and fix that. I'll be back in just a moment.
While Shadon is doing that, I guess I will jump into just kind of recapping what happens in episode 7, because I'm guessing that's probably what we're going to be talking about here. So episode 7 opens on, like, literally the biggest question we had from the previous podcast just immediately being answered, like, in the first second. Is Auntie and I keep vacillating between the second and Kaiju Frog Girl. They're both from SSSS Grid Band, are like literally right there. Obviously, they're new designs. They're not the exact same characters that we knew, but they're like instantly evident from the first, moment that's who they are.
She's still drawing. Mark's video has disappeared. It's been replaced with a static image.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, he's just fixing the aerial.
No, virtual camera.
One day when I get better at streaming, I'm going to replace this with a little technical difficulties image if ever any of our webcams go. It'll be the one straight out of The Simpsons. I have
absolutely no idea what just happened. My camera... We might just have to do without my camera, because I might have to like go and like under my desk and like unplug it and then replug it back in, which sounds like it would be a nightmare to do on stream right now, unless you want to talk for like 15 seconds while I do that. It's up to you.
No, I can absolutely do that. Give it a go, my friend. So anyway, technical difficulties aside, one thing I want to note as well is that the second, Ansolius, frog kaiju girl, whatever you all call her, she, still, like, there's little hints of their behavior in these episodes that just still mark them as the characters we knew from Gridman, while of course them being older. Hers being that she draws on the streets or on the walls, wherever, like these diagrams of kaiju that still look very childlike. Anti, like, for all his stuff, he's still a jerk. Kicks the shit out of Galma a couple of times, which is, I mean, Gamma's a likable guy, and he might be a zombie. Oh, there we go.
Got it. I think it just came unplugged. I have a USB extender in there that it probably just came unplugged from. So
it's like the
sorry about that.
It's like the olden days when you had a CRT TV with an aerial made out of a coat hanger. You're just like, I'm just gonna hold it up here a little bit. Oh shit!
The good old days.
The good old days, indeed. So yeah, you were saying about I was just mentioning there about how like she and so it's not like she's still got that habit of drawing like these chalk things. Like there are the behaviors and the like mannerisms that are still carried over, but they are older and for the most part in some sense wiser.
Oh yeah. Especially, well, maybe just I don't know if they're necessarily wiser. They're certainly more normal. They
for these characters definitely
are less overtly weird. But they are called the Grid Knight Alliance. Mm-hmm. That is their official name. My only other note from that initial scene is I don't know if it's been fully explained yet why they have all those like canisters in the boat and why they're always traveling by boat, or we see them a lot in a boat for some reason. Maybe that is how that they're like entering this new virtual world. I do know that the second carries the suitcase with her that has all their like gear and stuff in it. So where she pulls the little repair canister out. But yeah, other than that, I don't really. I'm sure it's probably just visual flair, and I'm just reading too much into it, which is something I'm very good at. But
it might be, cases of beer, ice cold. It's a hot day out there.
They are adults now. They do deserve to crack a cold one with the boys every once in a while.
I mean, Auntie's got a big enough sword for it to open those cans with, so why not? I will mention, by the way, because you brought it up, the healing powder, beam, ray, whatever you want to call it, that, from what I've seen, is also straight from the original Gridman
yes,
series.
That is a reference to a character called Unison from episode 6 of the original Gridman Tokusatsu series, who also is a girl, has a treble clef on her outfit, and uses a baton. All things which the second also shares. Now, I don't know if they sort of have like I remember multiple times us saying in the previous episodes that we've done that character from the original Gridman, the kaiju frog girl, always felt like kind of a weird afterthought that they never fully fleshed out in the end of that series. I don't know if they have like almost kind of retconned them in their own universe into being a reference to that character Unison, or if she was always planned to be that in this show. I don't, again, I don't know how far they're planning this stuff out, but yeah, she's a direct reference. I mean, I'm sure if you've been on Twitter since that episode aired, you've seen the gifs of her literally the exact same camera angle, the exact same poses as the character Unison, who I believe is like some kind of like computer life form in the original Gridman. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so but I do remember that.
That's fair. I mean,
that is a direct reference.
It could be worse. It could be like that Microsoft dog, whatever it was, that would run around your PC back in the Windows 95 days. That would be
or Bonzi Buddy.
Oh no, we don't mention that name here.
Don't want to. Can't say. Don't say it 3 times while looking in a mirror, or else you will be summoned.
You'd be safer saying the word Baphomet over and over.
Exactly.
Just gonna put that out there. Gosh.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we'll come back to that actually later with respect to pulling through references from the original show. But I also want to talk about something else I think Episode 7 addressed with respect to my previous criticisms, and it was a specific line that Eugenicists have, and I don't remember which one it was, but they said something to the effect of, we're going to use kaiju not to kill people, but to destroy humanity.
The power of kaiju isn't for killing people, it's for killing humanity as a whole, is the exact line. So there's your purpose.
So here's the thing, right? Humanity as a word, of course, has at least 2 different meanings that are relevant to this discussion. One of which is, are we just talking about wiping out the human race? Is that what it is a stand-in for here? Or, more interestingly, because I don't think it would be, for one, it'd be impossible if this is a computer universe. Like, hey, we killed all of humanity, great, but there's just them fighting on a floppy disk. Oh no.
Yeah.
That's not exactly, the end of the world as we know it.
Right.
But the alternative, of course, is the other meaning, which is to destroy humanity as like a concept, the sense of like, ability to connect, empathy, the values that come with that particular term. It's a million nebulous depending on who you ask. But nonetheless, it's, I would say, like, individual thinking, relationship forming, relationship building, empathy, the ability to feel, I think. And I'm not talking about pain here, I'm talking about emotions, which of course is where kaiju come from. So again, like with Anti and his particular philosophy of how to deal with kaiju, we have what is arguably a self-contradictory agenda here, because the kaiju eugenicists want a world in which kaiju are needed, if I recall correctly, but they are also using kaiju to wipe out humanity as a concept in theory, which would then mean there would be no more kaiju left. This is fascinating to me for a couple of reasons. The first of which is we get episode 8, and episode 8 has the most amazing subplot like day out sequence ever, where the eugenicists just go and have a damn good time.
Yeah.
We get, of course, to pull up Wonder Egg priority as a comparison again, we get, people posing in a bowling alley. Mujina's like, she's doing her little thing pose there. She's having a grand old time. Mm-hmm. They're watching a thinly veiled Ultraman film in a 3D rocking theater where Suzumu is in many things in this little like sequence of events. He's just whatever. Yeah. If you've ever seen
those type of theaters are very, very popular in Japan, from what I understand. The 4DX style, moving seats, water shooting, and smells and fire, and all the. I don't know why anybody would ever want to watch a movie that way, but
I mean, it reminds me of like when you go to say for example, the show rides. I mean, the old Terminator 2 ride, for example,
exactly
in Universal, where we blew up the T-1000, you just get sprayed with liquid. I'm like, I know what this is. It's just water. But where has it been? That's my question. But they're having a
nowhere good.
They're having a grand old time, and fully enough, their effectiveness with kaiju, fighting with them, they seem to have finally started maybe cottoning on to the fact that they fight better when one and two of them are working together. And also, it's no coincidence that it's Mujina and Mr. I keep getting hit by satellites, which didn't happen in these episodes, which I was very sad about.
Yeah.
Like, they're the ones who seem to have, woken up a little bit to, expressing emotion and feeling and just generally, having a good time on the side, feeling positive. And that ties in some way into their fighting prowess with the kaiju. They still lose because Gridman comes in, Grid Knight, rather, comes in and wrecks their shit. But they are... I find it fascinating, again, that they are working towards an agenda, towards a goal that is completely contradictory to their own self-interest and to the experiences they are living in these episodes where they actually do have good times. We go back to the water park, for example. If you wipe out humanity, you can't enjoy the good things around you, and that, of course, then ties in with everything else we've said, for example, about Chisei, or will say about Chisei, rather, about Minami and her relationship with her sister. It's all surprisingly well linked together. So even though we still don't know why they want to do this, I have a funny feeling it might be some entity or some other enemy has given them this idea, has brought them back to make them do this. It would be, just like Alexis Kerrid, for example. But nonetheless, this is... It's not necessarily an answer to my original complaint of why they want to do this, but it's got me thinking about other things, and it shows how their philosophy is ultimately doomed to fail, or doomed to succeed by failing, if you know what I mean, because they will ultimately win by embracing humanity, and then there will be no more humanity left. Oh, whoops. Look at me as I stare up for this ruined world that I have created, and look at what I have destroyed. Yikes.
Yeah, that's true. Again, there's still a lot that we don't know, but I think it makes sense that they would be inherently contradicting themselves. No one in this show seems particularly hyper aware of their own motivations. There's a lot of doing in this show, especially with the kaiju eugenesis. So yeah, that's not. I mean, like that scene where Mujina and what's his name are talking, is like maybe the most self-reflective that any of the kaiju eugenicists have gotten to this point. And that was strictly serving a purpose of like telling the audience why exactly they're doing what they're doing. So yeah, we'll see. It's definitely interesting right now. I wonder how literally we're supposed to be taking everything that they're saying. But you know, that'll probably be answered at the very beginning of episode 10, knowing our luck.
Yeah,
with these questions that we have.
yeah. I still do think maybe the show is a little slow paced for my personal taste here, because I don't mind the idea of asking questions, but when we are literally 3/4 of the way through and the end game is still not quite in sight here, for a 12 episode show, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, because I want it to be. I mean, I'm not saying you should always follow the standard dramatic arc of do, you know, like where we get towards the most tense moment, like, and maybe that'll happen in the last 3 episodes, to be fair. I might not be giving them enough credit here, but I want to feel a sense like that shit's getting serious. And I know like that they've kind of cheated a little bit in the show by having Grid Knight in episodes 8 and 9 specifically, or rather 9, what's the point, nearly be defeated by the kaiju of the week. To show like, hey, even with him like chipping in now, they're still struggling in places. And to be fair, episode 7, Grid Knight does not defeat that kaiju on his own, which I'm immensely grateful for reasons I'll talk about separately. But it doesn't still feel to me like we're getting to a rising sense of the end game, like shit's getting real. Like by this point, Gridman, we've had the big reveal, for example, that there's the city in the sky, if I recall correctly, the whole computer sky thing. I might be wrong on that. But I'm fairly confident it was around then that it happened. And of course, we have the moment like fairly shortly after that when we have the dream episode where things again go pretty serious. But we also can see like Akane's getting more and more desperate at this point. So yeah, it's not currently, as I say, clear to me how like tense I should be feeling this, and it feels like it's still a bit slow paced, but I'm still enjoying what it's delivering anyway. So, Mark, over to you. What's your next talking point, my friend?
I just wanted to point out that something I did not notice on my first watch through, but I noticed today. Grid Knight, his official transformation pose is the Gunbuster pose.
It is.
Didn't notice that until today, but it is very important. We've already talked about Unison and the baton. We've already talked about the B plot of Koyomi saving Inamoto's husband. I briefly mentioned it in my little blurb at the beginning there, but the crux of this episode revolves around the Tokyo Bay Aqua Line as a location. Now, this is I put in my notes that it's a real Gainax nerd location. It's just a real popular location to film at for tokusatsu and also by extension anime, because it's literally a giant tunnel with like a huge building built on top of it that just like goes out in the middle of the ocean and goes out in the middle of Tokyo Bay and disappears, and it's just like a super crazy looking thing. And so but it is, most people would know it from, if you've ever seen Hideaki Anno's 2004 Cutie Honey movie, the first battle in that movie takes place like at the exact same location as the final battle in episode 7. And I was super happy that they did that, because this show, like, honestly, this is Dynazenon specifically has felt more like a sort of pseudo Gainax throwback show than like maybe anything else that Trigger has ever done, which is really surprising to me, because it's also maybe like one of the most understated, like this and Gridman are like very understated for Trigger. Like obviously I'd say understated, there's a lot of like giant robots punching each other, but like character moments and stuff, and just like how much they rely on that
subtle framing
to tell the show's story, and like just how like, you know, everything involving humans in the show is very like normal and like dramatic, which is not really Trigger's like, you know, style usually, like especially if you look at something like Promare or even like Little Witch Academia, like everything is very over the top, very like, you know, very acted, whereas in Gridman it's very, you know, just kind of understated until the giant robots and kaiju and giant heroes start showing up. But setting it at the Tokyo Bay Aqualine and some other stuff that happens later on in the next 2 episodes we'll talk about have definitely made me think of Gainax more than maybe anything that Trigger has done so far with this show. For sure.
I would agree. It certainly feels at times like this Evangelion adjacent in the characters. There's a phrase I once heard in a video review I watched of Star Trek 2 of all things. It's stuck with me since then, in which the reviewer described how Kirk, played by William Shatner, is often like, you know, a complete ham. He's like the well, I think that, you know, we have to, like, he's just. And the thing is though, like, they commented how there's a, like, immediately after the famous Khan moment, there's a bit in which he's talking with I cannot. It doesn't matter. He's talking with the lady researcher, and he's talking in a very muted, like, kind of hushed, low voice. And the reviewer commented that, yes, sometimes William Shatner is the guy who screams Khan, but sometimes he's the guy who screams, like, 10 times louder without going above a whisper. I thought, that's such a brilliant way of describing that, and that's the kind of thing I would use to describe how characters in Dynazenon come across, particularly Minami, but also Kaiomi to some extent as well. Like, I'm not saying they're going through, like, the worst emotional trauma necessarily ever, with the possible exception of Mimi because he's still dealing with the suicide of his sister. But nonetheless, like, the emotive nature of what they say, like, how much, like, their emotional volume is present, it's very, very dialed back. And I keep thinking, and you brought up, for example, Promare. Now I can't remember the firefighter's name, which makes me feel very embarrassed. I know that, is it Gallo, isn't it? Yeah, Gallo Finos.
Yeah,
that's the one. Gallo, Gallo does that trigger thing, and I've seen this also in BNA, and I've seen in Kill la Kill, where he will, like, go up to someone and he will start, like, making this grand pontificating speech where he will be leaning into the opponent's face and he will be declaring, like, how powerful his guts and his heart, like, you know, his heart is and all that. It will be the most fiery, hot-blooded, like, you know, declaration of "fuck you, I don't do what you tell me" kind of thing. You know, and the music's fun. Like, it's very bombastic. It's very, again, maybe hammy, but it works for that kind of material. That, I would argue, is what Trigger is known for. The bombast in their action is reflected with the bombast with the character moments. And that's fine. That works well. Like, there's a nice synthesis between the two. But in Dynazenon, as you rightly point out, like, the characters feel very restrained, very muted. They feel normal, for lack of a better term. And that's not a criticism of Trigger's other works. Like, when it's applied with intent and executed well, it works great there, and it works great here because, again, implied with intent and executed really well. It's shocking to me, but it still works.
Whoever the ADR director on this series is doing a bang up job of making sure that a lot of these characters, especially, Yomogi, Minami, Koyomi, are really the big three of they're delivering their dialogue in extremely naturalistic ways. I mean, anybody that speaks any level of Japanese will tell you that the way that they speak in Japanese in most anime is not reflective of, like, what conversational Japanese sounds like in the slightest. But there are exchanges, especially between Yomogi and Minami, that are so muted and so normal that it's like they sound more like an excerpt from, like, a J-drama than, you know, like, even something like out of, like, a tokusatsu. I mean, usually tokusatsu dialogue is, like, somewhere in between anime and conversational Japanese a lot of the time, depending on, you know, who the actor is and what series it is. But, you know, even for tokusatsu, they're delivering some extremely, extremely naturalistic performances. And I always, like, really commend anime that do that. I remember Erased really, especially like the main character. I think mostly because the main character was actually played by a dramatic actor and not like a voice actor.
I did not know that.
Yeah, but even Aoyuki, who played the main girl in that series, I can't remember her name now, but
Hinazaki.
yeah, even she was delivering some extremely naturalistic dialogue in that show that was really atypical of her, because she's Aoyuki, she's like the hammiest of the ham when she wants to be.
She plays an evil soul-sucking demon sword in Thunderbolt
Yeah,
Fantasy at the moment.
exactly. She's Shuten Doji from Fate Grand Order, which is like,
Your bones.
basically the exact same voice as the soul-sucking demon sword from Thunderbolt Fantasy. But, I always really commend shows that do that when it's appropriate. And anime still really doesn't do that often. But this show, I feel like, shockingly, given its subject matter and how like over the top it is, really does have some like very natural human sounding dialogue in it. At points. There are obviously characters like Galma and some of the kaiju eugenicists that like obviously don't talk like any normal person speaking in Japanese would. But it's cool to see both.
I mean, they're doing well for mummies. They've been out of like the social loop for 5,000 years. They don't know how like to get down with the kids. They're trying.
Exactly.
They're trying.
I want to circle back real quick and just point out that you did mention, I kept referring to her as the second. She does have a name. It is Enocelis, and I always forget about, because like that whole section of the original Gridman anime is like such a blur to me. But she is like a sort of human reincarnation of a monster or a kaiju from the Tokusatsu series with the same name, Enocelis. And at one point in Gridman, apparently, I don't really remember this, and probably don't remember it mostly because I had completely forgotten about this monster when I watched that first Gridman show. But that monster shows up to like protect her at a certain point in the Gridman anime. Which is like the direct, it's them showing like, oh yeah, she's like the humanoid, which is why she kind of looks like a frog or like a weird like turtle, because or has like like that sort of like almost like amphibian reptile kind of like look to her face a little bit.
Tsuyu's sister from My Hero Academia.
Yeah,
there you go.
Enocelis is just a giant turtle in the original series, so there is a direct connection between her and that. It's weird. She's like a weird hybrid character between that kaiju and the character that we already talked about. Because I'm looking at her original design now, and from the Gridman anime, and even that had a treble clef on it. So they clearly were always, that kind of answers my question. Like they clearly had thought this out at least that far, that they wanted to, draw a connection between all these different various characters. Anyway, not to sidetrack, but I wanted to gloss over that in case I get yelled at about on Twitter later. I did not forget that. I just had to be sure.
No one's allowed to yell at Marc over Twitter. I won't allow it.
Yeah, especially not about Gridman lore, which is a freaking mess as it is.
Don't fucking do it. Don't fucking do it. But you were saying, by the way, about like naturalistic dialogue. There's something else I want to point out that has been present throughout the show, but to me felt a little like more noticeable this time around. And it's mostly because we get to see Yomogi's like friend group, the bunch of kids he hangs around with when he's not piloting giant mecha. But they do like there are things like where one of them feeds, like there's the other girl with the mask down, she's like feeding the little pocky stick to her sideways on, and then we get the thing where Minami just does like the little sideways chop into his like abdomen. And
I like that.
There are a lot of behaviors in this show, like characters like interact with each other, or the way that like the kids hang around in schools and such. Like, I mean, I've not been to school, of course, since I was in school as a kid, so I don't know like how this all works out. But it feels like very authentic, very naturalistic behavior by people of that age. Like people act like the age they
feel
would.
Like teens.
Yeah, they feel like teenagers. Teens. Yeah.
Now they're not as annoying as teens actually are in real life, but they. Yeah, they do feel like teens. Honestly, the only person that doesn't really act their age most of the time is Chise, but she's also shown in the show to be kind of a weird one as it is.
I thought you were going to say Galmer, and I was like, is that because he doesn't like grow and ask for brains?
Yeah, Galma's 5,000 years old, so he's allowed to act however he wants.
He's still got
as far as the characters that actually are the age that they look. You're right. There is a lot of like, very sort of natural seeming, goofy teenager behavior happening in that. Like, and also like the Minami calling her friend mom all the time for like criticizing her on stuff or like calling her bullshit on stuff. Like, that's good. I like that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they're not fully there because honestly, real teenagers are like not people that I would necessarily want to follow like day to day like this in a show.
Yeah.
But they are, they're good at, at least the like sort of like little behaviors that make them seem more human.
Yeah, I agree. One point of comparison I'll make for people who listen to those podcasts, but if you haven't, I can go through it a little bit briefly anyway, is when myself and Doc covered Horimiya, this is not to drag on Horimiya, but what Horimiya did a lot of times, it had the anime sensibility of here's like chibi faces, here's like smoke and all that coming out people's heads, that kind of thing. And that's a stylistic choice that was fine for that show. I'm not going to complain about it. Because I think, but the point I'm going to make though is like the characters in Horimiya, like, they still acted for the most part kind of like authentic teens, but like their behavior was like amplified and magnified and exaggerated through the lenses of these, cartoonish moments where, you had like Horimiya coming up behind like this random girl and like she's massive and she's got like a face that's covered in like darkness and like she's scowling, there's lightning and all that. And again, fine for the material, but to Dynazenon's credit, like, to keep it grounded, and I think this is why it works alongside the giant robot stuff, and keeps it like, the ground level stuff with our heroes like relatable, is you don't get that. There's no like goofy, there's no either trigger sensibility of like, people leaning right into the camera and yelling in your face. There's none of that. There's none of the Horimiya stuff or like any of the cheap stuff. There's nothing like in Fruits Basket. For all that those shows do have offensive behaviors, and again, not dragging them on this, like Dynazenon makes the smart choice of not indulging in that particular stylistic choice as well.
Yeah, because it would undercut the tone of the show. I mean, the tone of the show is already goofy as hell, but it's goofy as hell in a way that anime usually isn't. It's like extremely, extremely dry and extremely subtle. Like, there's a moment in I want to say episode 8 or 9 where Auntie is walking upstairs. Yeah, it's in episode 8. Auntie's walking upstairs and he turns around to talk to Yomogi, who's behind him, and his sword just kind of clinks against the railing, and they just kind of let that sink in for a second.
No one comments on it.
Yeah, because it's just like, anyway, like, because it's, like them highlighting the absurdity of like the day-to-day of carrying around a giant katana with you through like a city environment. Like, it would be stupid. It would be hitting stuff all the time. So it's like, that's the type of humor that this show brings to the table. And you're right. I think that like sort of like chibi faces or like slapstick stuff would really, like kind of interfere with the show's overall tone. But I will say the fact that it is Akira Amemiya of all people that is contributing to this show's sort of like muted tone is absolutely insane to me, considering how the two other things that he's most known for are Inferno Cop and Ninja Slayer from Animation, which are like could not be more opposed to everything that the show is.
I mean, like, there's that quote, like, of writers using subtext for cows. I feel like he would say, like, subtlety is for weaklings and all that. But hey,
you would think.
I give him credit for
that's
his range.
Hiroyuki Imaishi, though, turned out to be that guy, and I guess Amemiya is even more subtle than Yo-Yo Shinari when it comes to putting the tone of a thing together. So I mean, I'm proud of him. Proud of him for doing it. No bigger career glow up than going from Ninja Slayer into Gridman and Dynazenon. It's truly incredible.
I just hope at some point that we get like just as a joke, like Inferno Cop fighting Dynazenon. That would be great.
You say that as maybe a joke, but I have been at the Trigger panel at Anime Expo more than once where they have brought like bespoke like joke shorts to show the audience of characters from Inferno Cop like blowing away Little Witch Academia characters and like
wow.
Yeah, no, it's like legitimately they make them just to piss off the people that make those shows.
Good, as they should.
They'll like bring Yo Yoshinari and Amemiya in, and Amemiya will be like, "Hey, I think it was legitimately, I think it was like right after Luluko came out, and they had Imaishi and Yo Yoshinari there, and Yo Yoshinari was like in the middle of making the Little Witch Academia TV show, and they had made this short that I guess Amemiya had directed where Inferno Cop fights Sushi from Little Witch Academia, and it was like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. And Yo Yoshinari legitimately, I don't think I've ever seen that man look more tired in my life. They did it just to piss him off.
We have a quick ad-lib question in the chat, by the way, from Yukinon asking you specifically,
yes.
Marc, do you have any of those trigger dollars in your wallet?
Oh man, I have one somewhere around here. I wish I knew where it was.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought Yukinon was joking and like he was saying that you like had a backhand.
Oh no,
that's actually a thing.
That's a thing. So at one of their panels at AX, I think the last one that I went to, which would have been 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, before I decided to stop going to AX because it was bad for my health. But they came out, in Kill la Kill, when they go to Osaka and they fight the like kind of Daddy Warbucks character.
Oh, when Marco's doing like this.
Yeah, and they're literally shooting money out of like SMG, like money SMGs at her.
Yeah.
They had like essentially the real life equivalent of those guns where you would load a stack of bills in the top and then hold the trigger and it would just like shoot them out. And so Wakabayashi, one of their producers, and like one or two other staffers, like literally came out the back at the start of the panel and just ran through the audience, like rapid fire shooting these trigger dollars at people. And then I think like maybe 4 or 5 of them out of the stack of probably 1,000 that they shot into the audience had like a thing on the back where you would like go up and they'd give you like a signed print or something like that.
That's amazing.
That is a mark of distinction. If you have a trigger dollar this late in the game, that's how you know you're cool. But yeah, no, I have them. I have one lying around here somewhere. I never really did anything with it.
That is a currency that won't suffer from inflation anytime soon. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, it's like stuff like that. That is why it's no small wonder why Trigger probably has a bigger fan base in the United States than they do in Japan, or at least a more ravenous fan base, because I don't think I've ever seen an animation studio, their staff like be so eager to like constantly come present at American conventions, because they just don't receive the type of response in Japan that they do in the US. I mean, having been there for multiple panels of theirs, it's like a rock concert.
Yeah,
these people are just ravenous for the stuff that they present, and the way that they present it is more interesting than any anime panel. I mean, what other official studio panel you're going to go to where dudes come out the back shooting fake money into the crowd? I mean, it's if they did it on a flow, they'd basically be the Joker from the Tim Burton Batman film. Yeah, basically.
But anyway, just to go back to the comedic elements of this, like Dynazenon also continues to be pretty good at still being funny in a dry way, as you say, like where characters will have those long pauses, like the conversation that Yomogi has with Ansi, where there's just those pauses for like a solid second, and then he goes, "No." And of course the amazing little like catching his sword on the stairs. I mean, he's imitated Caliber so much. He's even imitated his his clumsiness, which is great. The show it's so well rounded in a shocking way now that I think about it. I mean, you've got so many different things here. There's not, of course, anything like great over political discussion or anything like that, but you've got like a bit of romance going with Minami and Yomogi. You've got the giant robot stuff, of course. You've got like just the plain fun slice of life stuff that's happening, like even with the eugenicists like having their grand day out. You've got the comedic moments. It delivers on a lot of stuff.
It really does.
Yeah. Yukinon in chat has just brought up a point that I almost forgot as well, which is in one of the previous episodes, Minami just yelled, "Something beam!" And that comes
He keeps
back.
doing that. That's the official name of that attack, is the Nantuga beam.
I'm so glad that they kept that. Like,
Yeah. No, it's the best.
The writers of this show have a really good appreciation for how to do gags and also repeated gags as well. Without them becoming overly like stale or obnoxious. Like, it's very subtle, it's very dry, and it works brilliantly.
Well, it once again returns to the point that I made on I believe the last episode that we talked about this, which was that there is nobody in the anime industry better at playing with the conventions of anime itself than Trigger. They know their shit. I mean, there are no bigger anime fanboys in the industry than the people that work at Trigger. If you look at their desks in their office, I mean, you'll see it's just, they know the stuff that they're the milieus that they're working in better than anybody else. And so yeah, like the Nantuka beam, and like I know I mentioned the stuff in Kill la Kill where like the words on the screen would then just become physically manifested in the world for like a temporary bit of time just to like play around with that particular convention. And like, yeah, so it's I do, yeah, I mean, nobody does it better than Trigger in that department, and nobody does it in a way where it's like not annoying, because in a lot of ways there's nothing more annoying than like, like, oh, is that a JoJo reference? Like, is that an Evangelion reference? Like, you rarely see that type of stuff in Trigger anime because they've seen it, they've seen it all before. So
they're inventing their own thing.
That being said, there is at least one extremely overt Evangelion reference that we'll get to in, I believe, episode 9. At least that's how I'm reading it.
Nice.
We'll get there.
Okay, so my next talking point. What's my next talking point? I've got notes here. I've got to read my notes. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about, because I'm going to use this also as a setup for my second slash talk. I've got a couple of different things I want to cover. Still fit to go. Which is, let's talk about the idea of team-ups and crossovers, because make no mistake, bringing in Anti, Grid Knight, great on paper, but fraught with risk. Why do I say risk? Because the thing that you want to do is you want to make absolutely damn sure that bringing in someone else from a different, like, we'll say franchise for the sake of argument here, even though it's because Gridman's a different show, but it's still, you know what I mean, basically.
Yeah. It's all part of the same universe.
Yeah. It risks disenfranchising and devaluing Dynazenon the robot and Dynazenon as the characters. And they got the crap kicked out of them, and now Anti's here, and he's going to save the day. There you go, Who cares anymore about our bunch of Muppets, like, driving around in their silly little submarines and whatnot. But I think the writers do understand the balance that's needed here, because conversely, you don't want to similarly bring in a character from a different show and have them then get completely backhanded to just artificially show how good the heroes that you like starred in this show are. They use them as cannon fodder, like as red shirts, to prove how serious the situation is. And the show strikes a good balance with that, because, make no mistake, Anti comes in and saves Dynazenon from getting blown the fuck up. But then the way the subsequent fight is structured in episode 7 is they have to work together to defeat the kaiju. Yeah. Anti can't beat it on his own, and we get as a result, like this like union of them two working together gives us the amazing like finale combination attack, the Dynazenon you son of a bitch moment. This is like all the evidence you ever need to prove that you should always write a team up with the intent of making both sides like have significant and worthwhile contributions to conflicts, because then you, through that synthesis, you get the glory of these characters and giant robots coming together and wrecking shit. Or even just this is where I'll foreshadow my criticism of episode 9, and you said it was the greatest henshin moment in Trigger history, basically. I agree, but
second greatest.
I agree, but I think a part of it rings a little hollow to me, and I'll explain why. So to give the backstory on this particular episode, of course, we have Gold burn. Yes, I was going
Goldburn.
Yeah, we have Goldburn, which is Chisei was like, had this seed that was gradually turning into what looked like a dragon, and now it has become a kaiju. But then it becomes a kaiju that she can control. And this then, of course, leads into the battle with the kaiju of the week, which, in order to beat it, after some emotional tumult with Minami and Chisei herself, in which they trade, points about, don't pretend like you have nothing, that kind of thing, that Chisei says to Minami, where we also have hints of Chisei's backstory. We get, of course, the Kaiser Grid Night moment. And the Kaiser Grid Night moment, it's flawless, immaculate, chef's kiss spectacle. It's great. And they know, the guys creating this show knew it. Like, the literal fact that once, the transformation is complete, the sun rises, you're like, fucking hell. The only thing you're missing there is God rays. That's it. Yeah. That's all you need. And, of course, the Dynazenon chorus. And the fight itself is awesome. The finishing blow is awesome. We get, as you noticed on your Twitter, I spotted before, the firework display for the festival kicking off in the post-victory moment. The cape. Yeah. The cape is,
the cape is the best thing about the entire thing. Yeah. It's just incredible.
It's super Kaiser Grid Night. All of that is great. But here's where I have to, unfortunately, criticize it. And I don't want to criticize, and Lord knows, Henshin fans, they're going to be, forming up into a giant human robot of their own and just barging through my door any minute. But the issue I take with this is Dynazenon as a show has made very clear, particularly with how episode 7 opens, in that the eugenicists are on top because they are working together, two of them in tandem, versus, our group who are, disaffect, they have their own, burdens. They're not, able to put them aside for the benefit of the fight. It makes a very clear link between how, the growth of the characters and the growth of their ability to fight. And that's fine. That works. That's good. I like that. It might overall, if you get reductive, be a bit simplistic because it is just, strength of will basically boiled down. It's not too dissimilar from stuff we've seen in all sorts of things like Persona, JoJo's, you name it. But it works. I like it. The problem I have, though, is the fact that the transformation gives Grid a Knight. He's the one, wearing the Mauler's armor. But there is no arc for him that gels with what's happening to the rest of them. The episode is about Chisei and Minami. But there's something about the way, the fact that, Kaiser Grid Knight is designed the way is where he's wearing his armor that seems to give him kind of, a visual weight to him that is not merited by the fact that nothing has really happened. Auntie's arc completed before this show even began. Now, that does not preclude the possibility of there being other arcs later on, of course. I'm not saying that, that's it, nothing more can be done with him. But the episodes have not been about him, and yet, just simply by virtue of how the robots are designed and the way the transformation works, it seems like, it's mostly about him and not about the other two, if you follow my meaning. I did not read it that way, and the reason why I didn't read it that way is probably twofold. Number one, it has been established in this universe already that is just kind of how it's got to work. Yeah. If you got a mecha thing and a giant hero thing, the giant hero goes inside the mecha, and that's just kind of how it goes. So I didn't really take too much issue with that. Also, mostly because Auntie really did not have a whole lot of dialogue during any of that henshin sequence and afterwards. But the ironically, well, maybe not ironically, but in a very silly way, the only thought that I had during this entire thing, and I kept saying it out loud, was just the power of friendship. And I know that's the biggest anime cliche ever, but this is maybe the most pure manifestation I've ever seen of the power of friendship. It's awesome. It's just it struck me as a very a culmination of a very mutual thing of just everybody finally gets that the only way that we're gonna triumph is everything has to become one thing. Mm-hmm. So I can totally understand the read of well, why the hell is Auntie the central figure of this transformation sequence, but I think that ultimately some respect has to be paid to the conventions of the actual mechanics of this shit, because it is it's a Subaraya production, and
I think that it probably is wishful thinking to think that there wasn't going to be some giant hero nonsense happening at some point. So I honestly didn't expect it. Like before Auntie was introduced, I honestly thought that this was just going to be an out and out mecha show and that they were just going to be doing something different. But now that it's happened, I'm glad that it is, the way it is. But yeah, I just think that ultimately it's less about, a metaphorical representation of everybody's emotional arcs in the show, and more just everybody has to combine, and this is just kind of the only way that we can do it.
Fair.
And for it to make sense, because it's the rules are established. It happened in SSSS Gridman, it happened in original Gridman. This is just kind of how it has to go.
I absolutely hear you on that. And I think that rather than the transformation sequence being changed to fit around us, what I think might have benefited this is if there was more time spent to Auntie actually interacting with the rest of the group, because his interactions are mostly with Yomogi. You can count Gauma, but I think his interactions are more the physical kind, where he just beats the shit out of him.
That's true.
I think that if there had been time devoted to those, that would have helped as well. Because I think also part of the issue here is I think that unintentionally there's a bit of symmetry between Chisei and Minami in terms of what their chosen kaiju mechs are, and that they're both flying mechs. Now, I grant you're entirely right to say that maybe this is just that you shouldn't take it necessarily as metaphor. I mean, I made the previous read, for example, that Gauma's machine was a submarine, and we didn't know whether to trust him or not yet. But one probably shouldn't read too much into that. I think you're right, but part of me thinks that there was potential here for the parallel between the two of them, having the power of flight. I could have seen a different, I mean, again, this is fan wankery shit, so I apologize for this, take it for what it is, but I could have seen a different kind of fight sequence where, following some character develop between them, Chisei gets Goldburn to combine with Grid Knight so he can fly, and then you've got Dynazenon flying as well, and you can have that kind of... Basically, my complaint is, it's all awesome. It looks fantastic. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But I think that, to me, there's a little bit of an unavoidable element of who gets the most visual affordance, the most visual priority, and that is, regrettably, again, as you say, just by virtue of how it's designed, going to be Grid Knight. But
I'm literally sitting here on Twitter watching the sequence right now as we talk, because I wanted to remind myself. I actually kind of want to push back against that a little bit, because if you look at the design of the final design of Grid Knight, or Kaiser Grid Knight, or whatever the hell it's called, there's probably 50 different names for it. When it actually is finished transforming, really the only recognizable aspect of Grid Knight is the top of the shoulders and the head. And the rest of it really is very dominated by Dynazenon and Goldburn. I mean, Goldburn is covering the entire front of the chest, the entire legs and arms are all just completely, Dynazenon, and then you have wings, which I guess Goldburn and Dynazenon combined. I don't know. I'm just trying to work out the visual style here. But yeah, I honestly, my read of it is that Dynazenon gets the most love out of anybody in that sequence. Once it's finished, obviously, in the sequence itself, Grid Knight plays a pretty central role. But that was the thing that struck me, and why I maybe had a different read on it than you did, was because remembering what all the weird henshin stuff from the original Gridman was always super obvious, regardless of what configuration they were using. It was Gridman with big ass arms, or Gridman with wings, or whatever. Only maybe once or twice was Gridman just completely encased in armor and somewhat unrecognizable. Whereas here, this really strikes me as way more of a... I hesitate to even call it a mutual split, because honestly, looking at this thing once it's done, there's very little Grid Knight that I'm actually seeing, other than a little bit of the head. And even Goldburn's thing, that thing clamps down over its head, and it's... I mean, again, this is nitpicking, and like you said, fan wankery, which is a fantastic word. But yeah, I don't know. I think we could probably agree to disagree on this and have different reads on it, and that's totally fine, because it's literally just a bunch of pretty colors and good 2D animation.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the thing in my head that I'm thinking of here is the transformation sequence you say, and that to me is like when I kind of put it in my mind, like that Grid Knight is wearing them as armor, and I feel like you could have done something with that in the story. But I will leave it there because make no mistake, people listening at home and fretting, like, you know, to suddenly, you know, pilot a light aircraft through my front window. I still thought that the actual like sequence, all of it, was fucking great. It was great. It gave me that big kid feeling again, like I mentioned before. Like, it just felt great to watch.
There's got to be moments in this show, regardless of like how many times that they're trying to like buck conventions, where you just got to do some cool, like big robot.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and make no mistake, having the Dino Soldier, what you think is typically the core part of like a mecha, become a shoulder-mounted cannon.
Another Gridman reference, by the way. That is a direct reference to. It's called the dynamic cannon in this, and it was originally called the Dragonic cannon in OG Gridman.
Nice.
But both OG Gridman and now Kaiser Grid Knight have dragon flamethrower rocket launchers, lasers.
It's
whatever you want to call it.
It's the shoulder attachment that Doomslayer has in Doom Eternal, basically.
Yeah. There is also a moment in episode 8 where Yomogi transforms to it, and Grid Knight just straight up uses him as like an RPG.
Yeah.
Basically, to shoot that one kaiju. So,
But
you're right. It eventually gets to the point where it just turns into the Predator. The thing from Predator.
That's the other Predator reference. We're getting all of them in.
Yeah, you know, there you go.
If we get a helicopter thing next, though, I'm going to pop off.
Yeah.
Oh, crap.
Well, I did want to point out that we do literally just have an absolute smorgasbord in that scene of just like the show giving us everything that we could ever possibly want. We have the full version of the full March version of the Dynazenon theme, which is incredible. God love Shiro Sugisu. He finally, I remember mentioning one of my biggest complaints about original Gridman was I don't think that Shiro Sugisu was really utilized as well as he could have been. Mm-hmm. And I am happy to say that I do not have that same complaint about this because there's a moment in episode 8, the moment where Yomogi and Auntie are searching for the kaiju, and that is probably the most out and out, just them straight up copying Hideaki Anno's style from Evangelion, because the pensive piano piece sounds exactly like something out of Evangelion. It's literally a montage of very wide shots. You never see their faces, you never see their lips moving, but they're having a very long, in-depth conversation about the nature of kaiju. That is extremely, extremely a sequence that you would see out of Evangelion. And I didn't even mean that earlier when I said that there was a direct reference to Evangelion. I think I put in my notes that is something that people are rightfully going to compare the show to Evangelion based on, and based on that sequence alone, I say they should, because it is stylistically at least very, very Evangelion. But we hear the fantastic Grid Knight March. There's the laser cape. There's the power of friendship, and then the opening starts playing. Yeah. It's got literally everything that you could possibly want in a big climactic battle.
Absolutely.
And this is only episode 9.
Yeah. How are they going to beat that? Good luck with that.
I know. Yeah.
My God.
So,
okay. Anyway, I'll pass the buck over to you again, Mark. Do you have any other talking points to throw in?
Well, I should get this out of the way, because I did mention Evangelion references. There is a moment in episode 9 where Goldburn turns into a shield and blocks the beam. I really, really, really want to say that is a direct reference to Operation Yashima in Evangelion, where Rei is holding the giant shield in front of Shinji, laying down in Unit 1 with the big particle rifle.
That's the diamond-shaped one, isn't it?
Yeah, and Ramiel, everybody's favorite angel, shoots the giant particle beam, and it deflects off the shield and makes this crazy, curved laser pattern, and Rei is standing there, and the shield is the exact same shape. It's shooting a beam. It's deflecting in a very similar manner. Shiro Sugisu is doing the music. I mean, it's that's gotta be a little bit of a nod. And at least that's my read. It could also just be a very like anime moment that I'm just reading too far into because of the music. Especially the music is that's the thing that tricks you. When you hear the guy that did Evangelion's music doing Evangelion like music over a scene, you're like, yeah, I gotta like I have to remind myself that not everything is Evangelion if it has this music. But
I mean, if it sounds, it's like the old thing. If it sounds like it, if it looks like it, I mean, comparisons,
like a duck and quacks like a duck.
Yeah, comparisons for that are just in their own form of high praise. Like, and hey, if it's there, it's there.
Yeah. This is a rare show where I feel like they are justified in making Evangelion references, and not just because they have staff from Evangelion working on it, but because, I mean, like, people made those people made that comparison with Gridman, and people got really mad at that, mostly because I feel like that's a knee-jerk reaction now because, bad journalists often compare everything to Evangelion without really knowing whether or not something is actually similar or not, because that's like one of their only frames of reference. And like, I get it, but much how like not every person making a pose is a JoJo reference. Not everything is a reference to Evangelion, but like, to push back against that a little bit, I would say that if you're going to compare a show to Evangelion, Gridman and Dynazenon are not bad shows to do it.
Well, there was an explicit visual reference to Evangelion in Gridman with the scene in which Rika is ringing from the telephone. It's the same green phone book, the same framing as when Shinji is doing that in one of the Evangelion episodes. So, believe me, like...
Which is more evidence as to the Goldburn shield moment being a reference to that scene in the original Evangelion.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose that that's what that was, because that was very fun and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just a couple of other things to discuss then. The one thing I want to mention very quickly is just regarding Chise, because we finally get some backstory on her. Ostracized from her school, seems to draw a lot. I think that
she has a tattoo.
Yeah, that was the thing that we talked about last time when she had that sleeve, and that's why she wears it to hide it.
Yes.
Also, she's in another outfit for once that isn't her default one, and thank fuck for that, because every time I look at her default fit, it's just Yeah.
And that new outfit is fantastic. It makes me wish that it was her regular outfit.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the weird like Tim Burton striped arm cover. Yeah, it's great.
But I mean, her whole arc with Goldburn is in of itself a continuation of what we said about the kaiju previously. It is, almost similar thing to what happened with Anti, of course, because he was a kaiju, but then he became like, a force for good, that kind of thing. So it just adds that other layers of ambiguity, but also, those layers of complexity where it's not as simple as kaiju bad. But on top of that, it gives her something that she's finally, I believe, even if not openly spoken about, wanted all this time, which is to contribute to the battles in a more direct way.
Exactly.
And it's a flyer again, it's a flying robot, which I think also works really well for just that kind of like emotional freedom. It works, Whether or not that's intended or it's just simply a function of it being because we wanted another flying robot, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that, it's not unreasonable to say that given the, like the kaiju, like Goldberg itself becomes a force for good, is tied into like emotional state, and her emotional state is getting better over time, like, where she has these moments, like, why not? It's not an unreasonable reading, in my opinion. So yeah, good to see that they got the backstory, and finally, even if it was at the end of the show near enough, although I would again say that perhaps to some extent, I wish that there would have been little hints of this here and there beforehand, in the same way that we get with Kaomi, because Kaomi's like backstory has been gradually been building up. We learn, for example, that Imoto was like found with like a massive sack of cash.
Yeah, again, just more evidence that something real not good was going on there with her. He probably made the right decision ultimately, I think.
Yeah,
but still probably has a lot of conflicted feelings about his relationship with her.
Yeah, for
sure.
I mean, that's the whole motif of this show. It's the idea of being trapped, being imprisoned, and what one of the eugenicists said at one point, of course, was the idea that relationships can actually weigh you down. So I think in the end, it's going to turn turn your chains into break free of your chains and turn them into strength, kind of thing. Would be the overall guess I would go with. That would make the most sense. So I only have one other talking point to make, really, with respect to I mean, there's tons of stuff I could probably talk about, but there's one final thing I want to really end the show on, and I'll get to that in a moment. Do you have any other talking points you want to go through, Mark?
Oh yeah, my biggest question at the end of episode 9, because there is probably more hints at Yomogi and Minami's like burgeoning like romantic relationship happening than perhaps any other point in the series. I mean, her literally going out of her way to go home and change into like this beautiful yukata, clearly to be seen by him, is, you know, a pretty big point. But, you know, Dynazenon and Gridman and Trigger in general are pretty famous for bucking a lot of conventions or like playing with conventions. So my biggest question is, will they buck the biggest, you know, sort of pseudo shonen anime convention of them all, and will Yomogi and Minami actually get together by the end of the series, like concretely? And I hope they do, because I really like them as a couple. And again, like, you know, we're talking about things feeling very natural. Like this generally feels like a very good, like, you know, appropriately framed, like sort of, well, I don't want to say healthy, because their first interaction was literally based on her ghosting him, but mostly healthy, you know, hetero relationship. And like, I'll tell you, it's not often that I root for a hetero relationship in anime these days, but I am rooting for them, and I hope that Trigger and Tsuburaya are both brave enough to like actually let it happen.
Like commit, yeah.
Like commit to it, like show it. I don't even need a kiss, just like holding hands, or like some implicit like acknowledgement that like by the end of the show, like they are in a romantic relationship.
Well, I'm gonna go one bear and make a hard call out, because the thing that Minami has been holding her back all this time is represented by one particular item. It's those anks, the links she cannot break. So what if we replace the link, like she throws that away, and then the ending shot is of them holding hands as the new link she has forged? Boom!
Boom!
Back at the net!
Or like, I don't know, she has her hand on one of them and Yomogi like grabs the other one, and just like they immediately come apart.
Oh, snap. Yeah, I can see that.
There you go.
I can see that, yeah.
Him helping her break her chains.
Yes. I mean, speaking from my own perspective as a cishet guy here, when it comes to cishet relationships and shows, like, I feel poorly served by them for most of the time, because the guy in the relationship is usually a complete twat. Like, how many isekais have that kind of thing going on, honestly? But I'll not beat that drum again. So I feel starved of like seeing relationships where it is just this kind of thing where you can see the chemistry. I mean, the little jab thing, that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Even just the visual cues. Like, there's this amazingly like well framed like shot on the bus that has like, you know, Minami's face between the bars, and she's like literally divorced from him in space on the frame. But in the bookend element of that episode, when they get back on the bus again, she's free of them now, and she's sat next to him. And of course, there are the scenes of them like at the railings and stuff where they gradually get closer together. Like, there's a lot of good chemistry. I want to see it happen. So please commit to it, Trigger. Like, I mean, that's to me also encapsulates a lot of how I feel about Dynazenon at this point, where it can and has delivered on the amazing spectacle of like giant transforming like gestalt robots with capes and sunrises and choruses and all that. The grand operatic nature of all of that. But then it has the little moments. It has the moments about the people driving these robots. It has the moments like where they interact, they have problems and all that feel authentic, that feel meaningful, and feel compelling to watch. You want to find out what happens next. So if it can deliver on the absolute insanity of Kaiser Grid Knight, I don't see any reason why they can't have the courage to deliver on, you know, the more softer moment of two people falling into a relationship with each other after all this time. Please let it happen.
I hope so. I mean, they literally ended Gridman with like not anime. Like they literally like went out of anime and shot in the real world for the final shot of an anime. So like if they're willing to go that far, then they should be willing to do basically anything. In my opinion.
Absolutely. Do you have any other talking points?
I think that's pretty much it. Futaba seems like a dickhead.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's little things, but we could nitpick all day.
We could.
We've
Well,
already been going for almost 2 hours, so
yeah. The final thing I'll mention. Well, firstly, Yukinon's asking me what this T-shirt is, and it's all of the Sailor Senshi. So there you go. Got this from QWERTY. It's too big for me though, so that's why I only wear it for streaming because you can't see how baggy it is on the lower end. But anyway,
mine is also just as cute, which is Junji Ito's Go.
I was gonna say that T-shirt like looks like it would glow in the dark. Do you ever?
Oh God, I wish.
Do you ever wake up and all of the ghosts in that T-shirt have vanished, and they might? Pray it never happens.
I pray to God that I never wake up and see that thing hanging on my drying rack with all the creep. I'm already creeped out enough by the weird fish monsters from Gyo. I don't need them showing up in my bedroom at night.
Fair. So the final talking point I'll end on, and the note I'll end our discussion on before we get to rating the episodes is and funny enough, we perfectly segued into this by talking about their relationship. Is there's an amazing little like shot after she arrives in the kimono to the fireworks festival, the little beach party they've got going, where I don't know who does. I'd have to go and have a look at it specifically as to the dress on the wrists of the arms to identify because it's quite close up shot. But they have firework sparklers, whatever you want to call them. I don't know what the word is. Sparklers. But I think that at least either way that you want to read it, one of them lights the others, and what a beautiful visual image for both their relationship and also what this show is trying to get across, which is that by coming together, like, we can literally light things up. I thought that was such a powerful little moment for the two of them. Like, you know, that one person's like passion like helps ignite another's. It's a great little way to end that episode. Fantastic moment. Loved it. Wow.
Yeah. Great 3 episodes.
Fuck yeah.
Really, really good.
But how great, I suppose. This is my tangential segue onto racing the episodes. Marc, I'll pass it over to you. Out of 5, give me your feelings.
I'm going 4.5 out of 5 on these last 3. I have been having an absolute blast with this show, but these past 3 episodes are truly like I have had so much fun.
Yeah,
watching these past 3 episodes. They really have kept me glued to them in a way that I can't remember an anime, especially a currently airing seasonal anime, doing in at least as long as the pandemic has been going on, if not longer. I can't say enough good about them. Honestly, I'd give them 5 out of 5 if it wasn't cliche, but 4.5 out of 5 I feel like is completely reasonable. And I genuinely love the show a lot.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Absolutely. For me, I am going to give 4.25 robot bro shakes out of 5. Because that's what it is. For all the reasons.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to get 4.5 laser capes out of 5.
Yes,
there you go.
Thank you. But I mean, there we go. We've got.
I forgot the format for a second.
It's fine. It's fine. We got both of the like key visual moments for the robot stuff, which is the bro shake and of course the laser cape.
Laser cape.
It's a cape made out of lasers. The fuck else do you want? But exactly. 4.25 out of 5 for me. Why? Well, for everything I've said, of course, but just also because I want to reiterate that this show, it feels so wonderfully well-rounded in what it's currently covering. Like, it gets the robot stuff right. It gets the human drama right. It gets the comedy right. It gets the visuals right, like the subtlety of it along with the big spectacle. Like, it's doing really well in all of its areas that it's choosing to tackle. Again, my grievances are because I'm a picky bastard and I'm not easily pleased. And I wish there was a different way that final fight could have delivered both on the meaning of, like, you know, the combining with, you know, the actual spectacle. But make no mistake, still a killer moment. Gonna be in all the, like, you know, that's a YouTube clip right there, of course, you know, if ever there was one. Like, people are gonna be going back to that and being like, fuck, you know, and how the show's gonna top itself now, I don't know. But the final thing I'll also say is that I felt that, like, Dynazenon was living in Gridman's shadow a little bit at this point. I've gone on record saying that on the previous podcast. And it's actually kind of ironic, but kind of apt, that with the introduction of a prominent character from Gridman, Dynazenon, the show, has now escaped that show's shadow, in my opinion, and become its own worthwhile entity, which kind of blows my mind when I phrase it like that. But that's what it's done, and all the more power to it for doing that. Well fucking done, guys.
Yeah, and I would also say that, like, in doing that, it has also essentially made itself essential viewing for people that watched Gridman, considering how it is now fleshing out stuff that I thought was like undercovered in the original Gridman. If you want to treat if you want to treat Gridman like its own, its own self-contained story, which I'd argue now with the existence of Dynazenon and it being as good as it has been, I would say that it probably isn't. Or at least it certainly was not intended to be, because how much they have now like retroactively intertwined so much of Gridman's lore into Dynazenon. It's essentially just like turned itself into like a must watch for people that like want to know about, a lot of these like secondary characters from Gridman, which, needed fleshing out, and they probably didn't have enough time to do so in the original show, and that's what Dynazenon's for.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to some of our original discussion about the idea of universes, like, it's easy to be cynical about, like, creating a cinematic anime verse thing, whatever you want to call it, because it can be seen just simply as, like, the hot new way of printing money. And make no mistake.
Metaverse. It sucks.
And I'll be fair here, like, we can't obviously say that Dynazenon is not intended to be a profitable enterprise, because it surely is. Yeah.
God, yeah.
And no doubt, like, in some way, the universe element has probably been incorporated as a way of making it happen. Like, but let me just put my cynicism aside, though, and say that this, like, whole idea of this, like, Gridman universe thing, we got to see it finally be truly, like, brought in this batch of episodes, and it's paid off. So I'm glad that they've done it. It's not to the point where I feel entirely like it's just a shallow, like, trapping, a shallow, like, writing or construction method of the fiction. It's just actually, it's delivering stuff that justifies its existence. Yukinon in chat asks, do you think any of the other characters from Gridman might make an appearance? My honest answer to this is, if they are ever going to do the triumvirate, which will be Dynazenon, Dynazenon Goldburn, Gridman, and Grid Knight, do what they did with Thunderbolt Fantasy of all things, where they had a spin-off film. Give us a spin-off film where Gridman returns, and then we get like a threat that demands all three of them come together. It doesn't need to be a whole series, but give us that.
I'll tell you what. I really don't like the practice of having a TV anime eventually culminate in a film that we in America will have to wait like 6 months. In the West, I guess I should say, we'll have to wait 6 months to a year, if ever, to get localized and released, depending on how popular the thing is. But yeah, if Dynazenon ended and they essentially used that to announce like a theatrical film, like I've been waiting for the moment when my premiere theatrical experience would have been topped, and I think that might be the thing to do it, which is ironic because they're both Trigger. But
and it's funny funny you say that, because Promare itself, like, being such a success it was, would arguably justify that film coming over quick, like, in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, exactly. And I also cannot imagine a Trigger thing other than Promare that would make more sense as a theatrical production than something with giant heroes and massive robots and kaiju. I mean, you want to talk about like how just thunderous that experience would be from start to finish in the theater. I mean, it would be incredible. I
imagine the like Kaiser Grid Knight moment on the big screen.
I would literally probably strangle someone right now just to see that.
I would pop off. I would pop off. Yeah. I agree.
But yeah, I kind of hope not, honestly, that we don't see any more characters from Gridman, or if we do, that they're like, I'm trying to think of like, just kind of like a brief reference here or there or something, or just like the what is that line from the last the really bad last Star Wars movie, like the generations of us now live on in you, like that type of moment.
Yeah.
But I think we have enough Gridman characters in this now. I think like we're at the perfect balance.
Yeah.
Anything else would be just too much. I say that now, but if they do it right, then I won't complain.
Properly executed, it would be fine. I mean, when you said that, by the way, about the whole Skywalker thing, all I could think of was, I'm so glad that at no point has Auntie said to Yomogi, like, you remind me of him. And I'm like, no,
Jesus.
no, that's cringe. I don't want cringe in this. You've got it right so far.
No cringe allowed.
Keep doing it right. But anyway, that otherwise brings us to the end of the podcast. So thank you very much to everyone who's listened live or maybe listening, when this comes out in MP3 format. Thank you very much for your time and your patience and your patronage. It's always immensely appreciated. Gonben, I expected, given Doc has been here, and he is sorely missed, make no mistake. Just so people are clear, Doc is going to be away for a couple of weeks owing to both his vacation and work commitments, but the show will continue. It may very well be the case that it will just be me doing it solo for some of our podcasts, but that will be determined as we go along, of course. But nonetheless, Warui Deshou will continue uninterrupted once per week, regardless of the fact that Doc's not here, because, damn it, we're just stubborn like that. But of course, this has not been a one-man show today. Joining me and helping me for us, and I've had a great time talking with you, of course, Marc. So first, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to go through this again. Like on all the previous pods on Dynazenon.
Oh, of course.
We'll of course have you back for the finale. I just wanted to ask.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait as well. But what I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here is, could you just very quickly just shout out your stuff? Tell the world about what you do, where you can find your stuff, what to look out for in the near future.
Yeah, sure. Onoanime.moe is the website that has that will literally just put you right on a page with every single link that you could ever possibly want for the stuff that I make. I have some stuff in the works. I'm working on a video. It has been an extremely stressful time trying to buy a new car, so I have not been working on that basically at all, but that thankfully now is behind me, and so I will be I mentioned it on the last podcast that we did, but I am working on a update to our virtual YouTubers video from a couple of years ago. So
nice.
If you've been into that stuff at all or curious about it, I'm trying to make it as comprehensive as possible, so look forward to that coming out sometime in the coming weeks, months, whenever it happens.
Definitely.
Much like CD Projekt Red falsely said with Cyberpunk 2077, it will come out when it's ready. But this was actually going to come out when it's ready,
and hopefully not in a horrendously buggy and broken state. One would hope.
Exactly.
I mean, I trust you on that. I trust you more than CD Projekt Red on that. Bastards leaked my fucking password once. Anyway, yeah, that's discussion for
unforgivable.
Different day. That's discussion for different day, though. But yeah, so thank you very much for joining us, Marc.
Of course.
If you're listening at home and want to help support Warui Deshou, get yourself on to firstly following us on the old social media at Warui Deshou on Twitter. You can find me at Shadon1010. By the way, we have a question here from Yukinon. Just asking if he can message you or DM you on Twitter because he's got questions about HoloLive and VTubers in particular.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You message me on my I don't know what links are available, but I am at Vermillionaire on Twitter with a 3 at the end instead of an E.
Yeah.
And that is my private Twitter. If you got any questions about anything we talked about today or VTubers, feel free to shoot me a message there if you're not, and follow me if you're not already following me. Because I'll probably see it there first rather than the Ono Anime account because I'm almost never on that thing. So
fair play.
There you go.
And so as for Warui Deshou, say follow us on the social media and find me at Shadon1010 on Twitter. If you have the time and the finances for it, do feel free to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Warui Deshou. Helps us make more shows like this. Allows you to get involved in both asking us questions about the shows that we cover, but also getting involved in selecting shows for us to cover, which is a key part of our benefits. If you're listening to this on a free-to-air place, that's fine too. money's tight for everyone, and I'd rather people spend it on something meaningful rather than a frivolity, such as our podcast. Nonetheless, if you do just take time to, give us a rating on whatever service you find us on, such as Apple Music or Spotify, that would be hugely appreciated. Helps our discoverability. But otherwise, that brings us to an end here. From myself and Marc, thank you very much again to everyone who's listening, whether you're listening to this now live as I speak, or whether you're listening to this after the fact. We will be back, or I'll be back rather, next week with Vivi Fluorite Eye for the patrons on the $3 tier or higher, and also, of course, Bottom Tier Tomazaki on the $5 tier or higher the week after that. But until then, stay safe, everyone. Take care, look after yourselves, look after your loved ones, and, we say on the podcast every time, I ain't going to stop saying I love the franchise and I love the meaning behind it. Embrace your everyone. To the ends of the universe. Good night.
Bye.